And I've auditioned for a lot and haven't got a lot. And then Gran Torino came around where he was talking to me.
You'd think, okay, this is your dad. Who? Who? Again? The confusion is almost comical at first, but then the recognition hits. Oh, yeah. That guy, Clint. Scott Eastwood grew up as the son of one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. A name that commands attention, a legacy that defines an era. And yet privilege wasn't part of his story. From the very beginning, he was kept at a distance. His father's name was missing from his birth certificate. Opportunities slipped through his fingers. Even when Clint Eastwood himself was directing the very films Scott desperately auditioned for. Imagine carrying a last name that opens every door in Hollywood and still finding every door closed. That was Scott's reality. The truth about his life and his relationship with his father is far more complicated than most could imagine. Growing up in Clint's shadow, when people hear the name Eastwood, their minds immediately conjure images of a rugged cowboy, a tough cop, the man who defined Hollywood masculinity for more than 50 years. But behind that towering reputation is a son whose early life was far removed from the glamorous world most people associate with the Eastwood name. That son is Scott Clinton Reeves, better known today as Scott Eastwood. Scott was born on March 21, 1986 in Monterey, California. On the surface, this should have been a moment of pride for one of the most recognizable actors in the world. But when the birth certificate was filled out, the space for father did not read Clint Eastwood. Instead, it carried the stark words, "Father declined," an unusual and heartbreaking statement that made public what was private. Clint had not yet acknowledged paternity. The circumstances of Scott's birth were far from simple. His mother, Jacine Reeves, was working as a flight attendant in the 1980s when she crossed paths with Clint Eastwood, already a legend by that point. Clint was directing, starring, and shaping a public image of himself as the ultimate leading man. Behind the cameras, however, his life was filled with complicated relationships. The affair with Reeves was kept secret from the public and eventually ended quietly, but not before producing 2 children. Scott and his younger sister, Catherine Scott, spent his earliest years in the quiet seaside town of Carmel by the Sea, California. Unlike the wealth and glamour associated with his father, his childhood was grounded in the stability his mother tried to provide. Jacine raised Scott and Catherine largely on her own, creating a household where values like discipline and self-reliance were emphasized. By the time Scott was 10, the family relocated to Hawaii, seeking a simpler life away from the intensity of California. Those years in Hawaii were formative. He absorbed the laid-back island culture, but he also grew up acutely aware that his life was different from what most might expect of Clint Eastwood's child. There were no mansions, no paparazzi, no instant access to Hollywood opportunities. And at this stage, he wasn't even using the Eastwood name, officially. He was Scott Reeves, carrying his mother's surname. Eventually, the family returned to California, and Scott enrolled at Carmel High School, back where his early childhood began. As a teenager, he was trying to find his identity while knowing that comparisons to his father were inevitable. Clint's presence in his life during these years was limited. He wasn't the consistent father figure most kids long for. What Scott received instead were lessons, not in the form of gifts, opportunities, or financial security, but through a silent expectation he should stand on his own feet. This dynamic created a complex emotional landscape. On one hand, Scott admired his father's achievements, wanting to live up to the Eastwood name. On the other hand, he was painfully aware of the privileges he had not been granted. There were no shortcuts. Clint, known for his old-fashioned values, believed his children should work hard, prove themselves, and earn everything, regardless of his fame or fortune. And that philosophy weighed heavily on Scott, particularly as he navigated the constant comparisons. Teachers, classmates, and strangers often sized him up against the man whose name he carried. Clint was the legendary cowboy. Scott was the son trying to find his own path. Physically, Scott resembled his father in ways that made avoidance impossible. Piercing blue eyes, a rugged jawline, it was a mirror image that drew attention everywhere he went. Yet this resemblance only heightened the pressure. People didn't just see Scott. They saw a younger version of Clint. Expectations were not only unavoidable, they were relentless. Despite these challenges, Scott pressed forward. The strict values instilled by his mother, respect, responsibility, independence, formed the backbone of his upbringing. Clint's influence, though indirect, was always present, hovering like a shadow over every step Scott took. The shadow reminded him both of opportunities he might have had and obstacles he had to overcome. Clint's belief in self-sufficiency meant Scott had to fight for everything himself. Even when it came to the world his father dominated. Imagine auditioning for your own father's films, only to be rejected repeatedly. That was Scott's reality. And it set the stage for years of uphill battles, countless auditions, doors slammed shut, and a lifelong struggle to prove he was more than just a famous last name. For Scott Eastwood, carrying one of Hollywood's most recognizable surnames was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the physical resemblance opened some eyes. On the other, the Eastwood name carried expectations he couldn't escape. To avoid accusations of nepotism, he made a surprising early career decision. He dropped the Eastwood surname and used Scott Reeves, hoping that people would judge his work rather than his lineage. This choice defined his early path in Hollywood. While many assumed that Clint Eastwood's son would have instant access to roles, the reality was starkly different. Scott began from the ground up, taking odd jobs to pay his bills, bartending, parking cars, while chasing auditions with relentless determination. Every no fueled his desire to prove that he was more than a reflection of his father. The journey was not easy. Being compared constantly to a living legend brings unique psychological challenges. The admiration Scott felt for his father was inseparable from a sense of frustration and loss of a conventional childhood, of a steady parental presence, and of opportunities that other children of Hollywood stars might take for granted. He learned resilience early, navigating a world where every success had to be earned twice as hard. By the time Scott began landing minor roles, his life had already been a masterclass in persistence. Every rejection, every door closed, shaped him into someone who understood the true value of hard work. His mother's early lessons in discipline and self-reliance, combined with the relentless comparison to Clint, forged an actor determined not to be defined by his father's shadow. Eventually, Scott started to carve a place for himself. Dropping the Eastwood surname was more than symbolic. It was a declaration of independence. He wanted audiences to see his talent before seeing the connection to Hollywood royalty. Small roles led to larger ones, and the young actor began building a portfolio that reflected his skill and perseverance. Emotionally, the journey was complicated. The father-son relationship was a mix of admiration, distance, and expectation. Clint's indirect lessons, work hard, prove yourself, stand on your own, left Scott with a constant awareness that the road to success was never handed freely. The Eastwood name brought doors, yes, but it also brought scrutiny, pressure, and a lifetime of comparisons. Scott's story is ultimately one of resilience. Growing up in the shadow of a global icon is no small feat. He learned early that fame isn't inherited, it's earned. And though his father's presence was limited, the lessons, both in expectation and in absence, shaped the man Scott became. Today, Scott Eastwood stands as more than just Clint Eastwood's son. He is an actor who has fought tirelessly for recognition, who has carved his own identity in a world that constantly measures him against his father. Every role, every choice, every rejection he endured contributed to a career built on persistence, determination, and talent. Growing up in Hollywood, royalty's shadow might seem glamorous to outsiders. But Scott's journey shows the human side of fame. Behind every iconic name is a story of struggle, sacrifice, and the quest for self-definition. And for Scott Eastwood, that story is just beginning. Because in the end, while the world may see Clint Eastwood's legacy, Scott Eastwood shows us that a name, no matter how famous, is only as powerful as the life we build around it. After years of struggle and relentless effort, Scott began landing his first noticeable roles in Hollywood. Each role, no matter how small, felt like a personal victory. For a young actor carrying the Eastwood name, Every casting decision came with its own pressure. People expected him to glide through the industry simply because of his lineage. Instead, he had to prove himself again and again, learning the craft of acting from scratch, often under the watchful gaze of those who saw him only as Clint's son. His early roles were a mix of supporting characters in films and television. While some critics overlooked him, those who paid attention noticed a quiet determination and raw potential. Scott would often recount the long hours on set, the nerves before each scene, the constant need to stay composed while proving he deserved to be there. Even in these small parts, he treated every moment as a masterclass, learning not just about acting, but about the workings of Hollywood itself. Public recognition, however, came with a complicated mix of admiration and scrutiny. Media outlets couldn't resist drawing comparisons between father and son. Interviews, red carpets, and social media attention constantly highlighted the Eastwood connection. Scott handled the questions with poise, often redirecting focus to his work rather than his heritage. Yet the comparisons lingered, a shadow he had to navigate carefully. He understood that while the public saw privilege, the reality was relentless effort behind every line, every audition, every small role. Mentorship became a crucial part of his development. While Clint's influence remained indirect, other directors and co-stars provided guidance that shaped Scott's career. From learning timing and technique on set to understanding the business side of Hollywood, these mentors helped him build a foundation of professionalism. He learned the nuances of collaboration, how to handle criticism, and the importance of patience, lessons that would stay with him for decades. Family remained a constant grounding force. His bond with his younger sister, Catherine, provided emotional support through the highs and lows. The siblings shared the unique experience of growing up with a famous father, yet missing out on the conventional perks of Hollywood life. They celebrated small victories together, offered advice, and sometimes clashed, but ultimately, the family connection gave Scott a sense of stability amidst the unpredictable entertainment industry. Despite mentorship and familial support, Hollywood's challenges never ceased. Rejection became a familiar companion. For every small triumph, there was a no, a closed door, or a project that fell through. Competing against actors without famous names forced Scott to refine his craft, to understand that talent alone is never enough without perseverance. Each setback became a lesson, shaping him into a resilient actor who could face both criticism and expectation with equal measure. Over time, Scott reached key milestones in his career. First supporting roles gave way to larger parts, each building his credibility as a serious actor. Critical reception began acknowledging his talent, independent of his father's legacy. Audiences began to see Scott for who he was, a dedicated professional, committed to his craft, and capable of delivering performances that resonated on their own merit. Each milestone reflected years of relentless effort, persistence in the face of rejection, and a refusal to rely solely on a famous last name. Outside of acting, Scott cultivated a personal life shaped by his upbringing. Hobbies, travel, and a focus on health and fitness mirrored the values instilled by his mother: discipline, responsibility, and independence. Fame never defined him. Rather, it was a backdrop to a life built on steady work, personal growth, and the pursuit of meaningful experiences. The relationship with his father evolved over time. As Scott matured, so did their dynamic. Understanding, forgiveness, and a deeper awareness of Clint's perspective allowed them to find common ground. Scott learned to admire his father while maintaining the independence required to carve his own identity. It was a delicate balance, one that required introspection and patience, but ultimately strengthened both their bond and Scott's self-perception. Carving his own legacy became Scott's ultimate focus. While the Eastwood name would always carry weight, he sought to define himself through achievements unique to him, roles that challenged him, projects that reflected his values, and performances that demonstrated his dedication, all contributed to a career that stood on its own. Scott's journey illustrates that true identity cannot be inherited. It must be cultivated through effort, choice, and resilience. For aspiring actors and anyone navigating a life under scrutiny, Scott's story offers invaluable lessons. Talent alone cannot shield one from rejection, and privilege cannot guarantee fulfillment. Perseverance, self-reliance, and commitment to one's craft define long-term success. Scott Eastwood's journey demonstrates that with determination and hard work, it's possible to step out of even the largest shadows and make a name for yourself. One that is recognized not because of who you are related to, but because of what you have built. Today, Scott Eastwood stands as a testament to resilience, dedication, and self-discovery. Every role, every audition, and every obstacle has contributed to a career shaped not by inherited fame, but by earned recognition. Growing up in Hollywood, royalty's shadow might seem glamorous from afar, but Scott's life reminds us that struggle, persistence, and personal growth are the true measures of success. And so, while the world continues to celebrate Clint Eastwood's legacy, Scott Eastwood quietly and deliberately builds his own, a legacy rooted in talent, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of identity. Fame may open doors, but it is the courage to step through them and carve your own path that truly defines a life worth admiring. Because in the end, the story of Scott Eastwood is more than the tale of a famous father and his son. It is a story of resilience, growth, and triumph over expectations. It is a story that shows us that while a name may precede you, the life you create defines who you truly are. As Scott Eastwood's career progressed, the transition from supporting roles to leading roles marked a new chapter in his life. Each new project brought a heightened sense of responsibility. Stepping into the spotlight was not just about acting, it was about commanding a presence, leading a cast, and proving over and over that he belonged on his own merit. The world was watching, and the comparisons to Clint Eastwood remained ever present. But Scott had learned to channel that pressure into focus. His breakthrough roles came in films that demanded not only skill but also an emotional depth that pushed him beyond what he had experienced in smaller parts. On set, he often found himself facing long, grueling days, complicated stunts, and intense emotional scenes. Yet through each challenge, he honed his craft. He absorbed every note from directors, every reaction from co-stars, and every piece of criticism from early screenings. These experiences shaped him into an actor who could carry a film not because of a famous last name, but because of talent, professionalism, and dedication. Among his most iconic scenes were moments that captured both vulnerability and strength, scenes that showcased the depth of his range and revealed layers beyond the public persona. Behind the camera, Scott was known for meticulous preparation and willingness to take direction, attributes that earned him respect among veteran actors and filmmakers. Collaborating with Hollywood legends offered lessons in humility, patience, and artistry, reinforcing the importance of continuous growth. Each interaction, each shared scene became a stepping stone toward an identity as an actor distinct from his father's shadow. Navigating public perception became another challenge altogether. In the age of social media, every comment, comparison, and speculation was amplified. Interviews often revisited the theme of nepotism, forcing Scott to articulate his journey of self-reliance and hard work. He learned to manage attention without losing focus, to separate constructive criticism from idle speculation, and to maintain privacy in a world eager for personal details. His responses were measured, reflective, and grounded in the reality that effort, not surname, defined his career trajectory. Personal relationships played a vital role in shaping Scott's journey. Close bonds with friends, colleagues, and family provided stability amidst the constant pressures of Hollywood. Romantic relationships, while intensely scrutinized, were approached with thoughtfulness and care. Scott valued loyalty, mutual respect, and personal growth, striving to ensure that love and connection were balanced with professional ambition. Family ties, especially with his sister Catherine, remained a steady anchor, a reminder of the grounded upbringing that shaped his early years. Off-screen, Scott cultivated a life that reflected the values instilled by his mother: discipline, independence, and responsibility. Fitness routines, travel, and hobbies like motorcycling or spending time outdoors offered balance and perspective. These pursuits were not mere diversions. They were extensions of his identity, ways to remain connected to himself, and reminders that life outside Hollywood was equally important. They allowed him to recharge, maintain mental clarity, and approach work with renewed focus. Philanthropy and social responsibility became increasingly significant as Scott matured. He used his platform to support causes close to his heart, engaging in charitable efforts, community outreach, and advocacy. While fame could have been a distraction, he chose to direct attention and resources toward meaningful initiatives, proving that success could be paired with generosity and compassion. These efforts reflected an understanding of the responsibility that comes with visibility, and a desire to make a positive impact beyond the screen. Observing Hollywood's evolution over the years provided Scott with a unique perspective. The industry had changed dramatically since his father's prime, with new challenges, technologies, and expectations. For young actors, the path was simultaneously more accessible and more competitive. Scott reflected on his journey, recognizing that perseverance, adaptability, and professionalism were timeless keys to success. His experiences served as both a personal testament and a guide for aspiring actors navigating a complex, unpredictable industry. The father-son dynamic continued to evolve with time. As an adult, Scott gained insight into Clint's choices, the complexities of fame, and the challenges of balancing a public life with personal responsibilities. Shared projects, conversations, and moments of guidance allowed the relationship to mature, blending admiration with independence. Emotional growth brought understanding and, in many ways, closure. Scott was no longer just a son under a shadow. He was a man who could reflect, respect, and define the bond on his own terms. Ultimately, Scott Eastwood's story is one of self-definition and resilience. Fame, lineage, and comparison could have defined him, but he chose a different path. He sought to build a legacy rooted in effort, authenticity, and personal growth. Each role he undertook, each challenge he faced, and each lesson he absorbed contributed to a career that spoke for itself. In a world that constantly measures achievement by visibility and inheritance, Scott's journey demonstrates the power of dedication, perseverance, and self-belief. For those looking to carve their own paths, his life offers crucial lessons. Talent alone is not enough. Privilege, while tempting, cannot substitute for hard work. Persistence, self-reliance, and the courage to define your own identity are the true determinants of lasting success. Scott's journey illustrates that even in the presence of enormous expectations and constant scrutiny, it is possible to emerge with a distinct voice, one that resonates on its own merits. Today, Scott Eastwood continues to pursue excellence, build meaningful relationships, and maintain a grounded perspective. Every audition, every scene, and every choice reflects a commitment to authenticity. Growing up in the shadow of a Hollywood icon might appear glamorous to outsiders, but Scott's life reveals the human side of fame, the discipline, sacrifice, and resilience required to step out of a shadow and stand on one's own. In the end, while the world may celebrate Clint Eastwood's legacy, Scott Eastwood quietly constructs his own. A legacy defined not by inheritance, but by talent earned through determination, lessons learned through challenge, and a steadfast pursuit of personal identity. Fame may open doors, but courage, perseverance, and self-definition determine who walks through them and what they build once inside. Scott Eastwood's story is more than the tale of a famous father and his son. It is a story of resilience, growth, and triumph over expectations. It is proof that a name can provide an entry point, but it is the life we build, the choices we make, and the effort we invest that truly define who we are. In a world obsessed with legacy and lineage, Scott reminds us that self-made identity, crafted through persistence, authenticity, and courage, is the ultimate achievement. And so, Scott Eastwood's journey continues, not as Clint Eastwood's son, not as a reflection of a legend, but as an individual who has carved his own place in the world. His story inspires, challenges, and reminds us all that the shadows of greatness can be transformed into pathways toward our own light. As Scott Eastwood's career evolved, he began stepping into roles that demanded more than simple presence. They demanded skill, depth, and the ability to carry a story. Each new project was an opportunity to prove that he was not just Clint Eastwood's son, but an actor in his own right. These iconic film roles, ranging from action-packed blockbusters to character-driven dramas, became the proving ground for his talent. On set, Scott immersed himself fully, absorbing every nuance of his characters and learning from every director, co-star, and crew member he encountered. Action and stunt work became a cornerstone of his career. From high-speed chases to intricate fight sequences, Scott embraced the physical demands of Hollywood with determination. Each stunt was a lesson in preparation, discipline, and perseverance. Injuries, exhaustion, and grueling schedules tested his limits. But these challenges forged resilience, sharpening not just his physical skills, but also his mental fortitude. It was through these trials that he discovered a deeper appreciation for the craft of acting, the dedication required to bring authenticity to every role. Collaboration with Hollywood veterans further shaped Scott's journey. Working alongside seasoned actors and directors, he gained insights that no classroom or audition could provide. Mentorship moments, whether through on-set advice, casual conversations, or observing seasoned professionals, taught him the subtle art of storytelling, the importance of timing, and the necessity of professionalism. These experiences reinforced that talent alone is not enough. Humility, focus, and a willingness to learn are essential to lasting success. Yet along with artistic growth came the challenge of managing public perception. Media scrutiny, interviews, and magazine features constantly reminded Scott that the world was watching, not only for his performances, but also for comparisons to his father. Each appearance required careful navigation. He had to assert his individuality while respecting the legacy he carried. Scott learned to handle questions about nepotism, to redirect attention toward his work, and to maintain authenticity even under relentless scrutiny. The pressure could have been overwhelming, but it became a motivator to continue proving himself, role by role. Balancing fame and privacy was another crucial aspect of his life. Hollywood's spotlight often threatened to blur the line between public and personal. Scott remained vigilant, protecting his private moments and ensuring that relationships, hobbies, and family ties remained intact. This careful balance allowed him to maintain mental clarity and emotional stability, grounding him amidst the unpredictable turbulence of celebrity life. Romantic relationships, too, were navigated with care. Public attention could complicate intimacy, yet Scott approached love with thoughtfulness, prioritizing mutual respect and personal growth. These relationships shaped him not only emotionally, but also professionally, teaching lessons about balance, patience, and the importance of support systems. Love and companionship became part of his journey toward understanding himself and navigating the demands of fame. Outside of acting, Scott cultivated a rich personal life. Hobbies such as fitness, travel, and motorsports provided outlets for energy, stress relief, and personal growth. These pursuits offered perspective, reinforcing that identity is multifaceted and not solely tied to public achievement. They became spaces where he could recharge, reflect, and approach his work with renewed focus. Through these passions, Scott remained connected to a sense of self that no Hollywood spotlight could ever overshadow. Philanthropy emerged as a natural extension of his character. Scott actively engaged in charitable work, supporting causes close to his heart. Whether advocating for community initiatives or contributing to programs that made tangible differences, he leveraged his visibility to create positive impact. The values instilled by his mother, discipline, responsibility, and empathy, guided his choices in giving back. These efforts underscored that fame carries not just privilege, but responsibility. Reflecting on Hollywood and its evolution, Scott observed both opportunities and challenges. The industry had changed dramatically since his father's era, with new platforms, technologies, and global audiences reshaping the landscape. He understood that young actors face a double-edged sword, increased access yet heightened competition. Scott's journey served as both a testament and a roadmap, illustrating the timeless importance of perseverance, professionalism, and authenticity. The father-son dynamic matured over the years. Scott gained insight into Clint's perspective, understanding the pressures and challenges of sustaining a legendary career while raising children in unconventional circumstances. Shared projects, mentoring moments, and candid conversations strengthened their bond. What was once a complicated, distant relationship evolved into mutual respect, appreciation, and emotional depth. Scott had transformed from a son living under a shadow into a man capable of reflecting on that legacy while forging his own path. Looking toward the future, Scott's ambitions remain clear. He continues to pursue diverse roles, exploring genres that challenge him creatively. His aspirations extend beyond acting, including producing, mentorship, and creative collaboration, reflecting a vision for a long-lasting and meaningful career. Every choice he makes is deliberate, a careful step in defining a legacy uniquely his own.